Welcome back to MLive's Dungeon of Doom podcast. It's our first off-season edition, I guess officially. Maybe last week's post-Holmes presser was, but we'll call this the first off-season podcast. I'm Ben Raven. He's Kory Woods. Kory, how you doing?
I am under the weather, but it is not going to stop the show.
I feel like you and I have been alternating sicknesses for a month, and I guess that's the price you pay when you spend as much time in small rooms as we do together.
Yeah, most definitely.
Perfect on-cue cough.
Oh no, on cue, you're right. Yeah, I just woke up yesterday, just like the past couple of days, just like, what the heck is going on? Where did this come from? But yeah, I mean, hey, when you're in this job, like you said, small rooms, around a lot of different people, stuff happens.
Illness was also running rampant through that Lions locker room in the final 2 weeks.
Man.
So it is like when you come home and you get sick and you're like, who got you sick? And you're like, one of the 12 people I work with every day or the 70 players in the Lions locker room. It's who's to know at this point. But
Exactly.
Today's podcast, we're going to obviously talk about the offensive coordinator search. We'll run through the interviewees that have been reported and announced and confirmed and all that stuff. And also the league-wide situation has gotten crazy with Mike Tomlin out and the Steelers going through a revamp and John Harbaugh's out and they're going through a revamp. So, and I believe it's like 40% of the NFL is looking for a new offensive coordinator. So we have a lot to talk about there. I'll offer my ranking of the 25 unrestricted free agents for some feedback for you. And I reached out to the Blue Sky followers for some questions. You know, we weren't calling this a full mailbag podcast, but it might turn out to be a mailbag podcast because we had some pretty good replies to the Dungeon of Doom at MLive.com email address and also on social media. But let's run through the offensive coordinator search. Obviously, John Morton was fired. We talked about that the last time on the pod. That happened within 48 hours of the season ending. The Lions interviewed David Blau. Commanders were very quick to promote him to offensive coordinator.
Right.
So I think that really does speak to the idea that Blau was a serious candidate here because, you know, whether he had interest outside or elsewhere, the allure of coming home to Detroit and working with Dan Campbell in that position, Commanders obviously felt strongly about him and gave him the job pretty quickly, man. Pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that I thought it was going to probably take a little bit of time for, Blau to just land some type of gig of whether it will be promoted by the Commanders or who knows, maybe even coming back home to the Lions and taking that vacancy. But just to your point, the fact that they did that so quickly speaks to what they feel about David Blau and not letting him leave that building. Again, I heard it in whispers around Allen Park just about how brilliant of a mind that David Blau is. So the fact that the Lions did reach out to him, somebody that has not only played in the offense, knows the offense, and knows the players, it made a lot of sense for him to get a look. But the fact that the Commanders just said, nope, wait a minute, you're not going anywhere, that says a lot.
Dan Quinn's job is essentially on the line this season too. So, I mean, that really speaks to it. I mean, you talk about a coaching carousel that's kind of lacking the young, hot offensive names that we've seen in recent years. We saw what the Commanders did with Blau. I mean, 30 years old, working with quarterbacks. That's a great way to rise in the NFL. Former quarterback himself has been credited for designing some trick plays, some creative plays. The Boilermaker play here in Detroit that he helped design while he was still a player. It's just wild. And credit to Blau. It's crazy that when you get in, I mean, next year is going to be my 8th season on the beat. I turned 37 a couple of weeks ago. It kind of makes you think about your own mortality. Cause I remember like one of the first stories I wrote on the beat was when the Lions played the Browns in the preseason, and then the Lions traded for Blau like less than 24 hours later. So it's always like, holy crap, this guy's an offensive coordinator now. But then you see he's only 30 years old. But hey, he was a legit candidate, and I think the Commanders' action really spoke to that. Some other names that have interviewed for the job, I believe Mike McDaniel, the former Dolphins head coach, his interview took place yesterday, which was Tuesday, January 13th. The biggest name out there, you know, the biggest fish in the ocean. He's interviewing for head coaching positions. There's going to be a lot of competition for Mike McDaniel. But as we said on the pod last week, if he doesn't like one of those head coaching jobs, that Lions offensive coordinator position, that's a way to boost your career back to where you want it to be really quick, man.
And also, just to add this in there, even though it just happened yesterday, who knows? They might reach out to him as well because the Philadelphia Eagles they let go, they parted ways, whatever you want to call it, with Kevin Patullo as defensive coordinator. So who knows? That might be a team that will reach out to Mike McDaniel. But the fact that right now all of his interviews that we know of to date consist of head coaching interviews and one offensive coordinator position that's with the Lions. To me, I think that does say a lot. That just says like, hey, if I'm not going to go and land one of these head coach opportunities, or unless one of these don't sound good to me, the Lions OC job is the only one I'm pretty much taking seriously. So, I mean, at least for right now, I would say that kind of does look good for the Lions, but I do like the fact that they're casting a wide search, which we're going to continue to keep on talking about.
I thought you were about to say Kevin Patullo as a candidate, and I was about to shut that down real quick. He's shaking his head. No, 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 no. But that's a great point because McDaniel with Hurts and Barkley and those receivers in Philly and that offensive line. I mean, honestly, it could come. I mean, I know he's going to get head coaching interviews and he deserves them, but the Lions and the Eagles offensive coordinator positions might be the best of those offerings for him because, I mean, my goodness, the chance to take over one of those offenses. You got the precise killer in Jared Goff. You got St. Brown and Williams and Gibbs and Laporta, hopefully. And then the Eagles have all what they have. So that's where I'm looking. I really think it'll come down to the Lions or Eagles OC jobs for McDaniel. And that's a very good thing for Detroit. Now, we've talked about Campbell and the play caller role a lot in recent weeks. You know, I've given my thoughts. I think there's going to be some real thought to him keeping the role, taking an offseason as the play caller. It's going to be really dependent on who they hire as OC. Like I said, if it was going to be someone like Blau, I think Campbell would have kept the play caller duties for this year, worked with Blau, get him ready for that. But if it's someone like McDaniel, it's not even a question. That dude's calling the plays day one. So there's a couple different tiers of candidates. A lot of these names I would have a hard time seeing not calling plays if they took this job, like Mike Kafka. But then there are guys like Jake Peets, the Seattle passing game coordinator, and Ravens quarterback coach T. Martin, other interviewees that interviewed on Monday, I believe. I think Kafka's interviewing today for NFL Network. Kafka would call plays. I feel pretty confident in that. But Martin and Peets, that leaves the door open for Campbell to kind of do what I was talking about with Blau and him calling the plays, him working with those coaches, working them into the system, letting them, especially outside names that haven't worked here before, letting them figure it out. So, yeah, where do you stand on that?
I I like the idea of it. I think that this team works best, in my opinion, when Dan is able to be the CEO and not have the extra responsibility of being the play caller, where he's just able to, just take a step back and look at everything and kind of put his I don't want to say metal because that's the wrong word, but kind of like sprinkle his imprint on things where where it needs to be matters. Manage as he goes along, not necessarily have the full responsibility of being a signal caller. So I would hope that I would. That's why I'm really hoping that for them that a Mike McDaniel would be the option because that way Dan is able to go ahead and just do what he does best, and he does not have to worry about the play calling because he has an experienced play caller already right there. A guy that is creative, has done some significant things with offenses that he's ran. I just think that would be the best option for them to move forward.
Yeah, I'm torn. I really am torn because I think you're right in that they have been historically better, obviously, with Campbell and the CEO overreaching, hand involved with everything role. But I do think if he had a full offseason to delegate, figure his staff out, that he could do it. But yeah, we'll see because I know those are just external names we've talked about. We're not going to hear reports. The Lions won't officially announce like internal candidates, but I can guarantee they're talking to Scotty Montgomery and Hank Fraley about those jobs too. And with Scotty Montgomery, I'd be really curious just because he's been a head coach at the college level. He's been a play caller. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's coached running backs. He's coached receivers. He's been the assistant head coach for a couple of years now. How would that shake things up? I don't know, but I can guarantee that Scotty Montgomery and Hank Fraley are intricately involved in those discussions as well. And with someone like Fraley, I think that would let you get another voice to take over the offensive line. That's a great idea with the last year's struggles, but it would also keep Hank Fraley around, get him working with Dan Campbell, and I think that would be a situation 100% where Campbell would keep the play calling duties. But with Montgomery, I don't know.
Yeah, I like the idea of Scotty. I think that Scotty is a guy that the offense players on the offense obviously respect him, and the coaching staff respects him. As you said, he's been a head coach, he's been a signal caller, and I think that he would bring I think that he would bring a certain type of juice to it. I'm curious to see how what imprint he would put on the offense, but just how he we see him coach in training camp during practices when he talks to us. There's just a certain energy about him and the way that he carries himself. I think that would be an interesting option, but again, for me, I don't know. I think that the idea of the outside voice to come in and maybe shake things up a little bit. I think that is probably the most intriguing option to go. Hank Fraley. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but and I don't want to come off as rude, but I just wondering would it be really recognized as an inspired hire?
It wouldn't. It wouldn't among because it would be viewed as them running it back with a familiar name. I think fans would react both ways to that. I think of the internal guys we mentioned, I think Scotty is the most intriguing just because I mean there's not many people who have worked closer with Dan Campbell since he got here. So that whole "it's hard to crawl into my head" quote that I think about after Campbell took over play calling duties from Morton after for the Washington game. I think it was week 10. You know that quote sticks in my head a little bit here, but and there's also the fascination of the external or the internal guy. You know, I know Morton came from Denver, but it was kind of an internal guy that Campbell knew didn't work out well. So I'm kind of with you. I'm at the point now where it's like, get somebody new. I don't care if they've crossed paths with Dan or not. If they click in the meeting, if they click in the interviews and he agrees with their mentality and what they want to do with his offense, go for it. Because I think that's what they need is a little freshness, a new set of eyes. What went wrong last year? How can we get this thing moving forward? And I just don't think that they can continue to try and run the offense they did under Ben Johnson without Ben Johnson because they really did miss that psychotic level of attention to detail and just his complete control of timing and sequential play calling and knowing when to call the trick shots, knowing when to get creative, and just really having a deep bag on third down and fourth down. You know, that just wasn't there this year. They were running an offense that they like without the guy running the offense. So I think a new fresh take, some tweaks to the system, some tweaks to the scheme. Jared Goff has to be intricately involved on everything with the offense, with the coordinator hire, with the direction of the offense. That has to remain because that was the superpower of Ben Johnson and Jared Goff's relationship. And I don't think they had that this year with John Morton.
Yeah, it just felt this year with the offense they were just operating at times off of talent without really like a true, intention of what they were trying to get done. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong in what I'm saying, but at least it's just how it felt like. It sometimes it just felt like they were kind of going through the motions. It was uninspired. And it was just like it was just something that was just lacking. And again, it might have been that it probably was that attention to detail that Ben Johnson brought to the offense. So I do think that just bringing somebody in that Dan Campbell does mesh with and that they're on the same page, at least through the interview process of what they want to do, how they envision offense moving forward. I think that could be beneficial for them moving forward. And again, if it's not Mike McDaniel, but it's one of these young minds that is coming up and then they're able to come in, learn Detroit system, and pretty much operate in the role that John Morton did, and then take over the play calling from Dan Campbell. Hey, that's fine. I mean, that's kind of almost the Ben Johnson arc. I mean, he kind of saw how Dan wanted his offense ran, and then he went ahead and became the primary play caller, and they took off.
Yeah, it did. And the interesting thing about Ben Johnson is I know him and Campbell crossed paths early in Johnson's coaching career in Miami, but Johnson was a holdover from the Patricia regime. So this is, that that flexibility, the adaptability, the ability to work together on things and come to a shared agreement is so important here. And the one thing I think about that would have been different with Ben Johnson calling this offense this year They would have adjusted better to the losses of Sam Laporta and then Brock Wright. I don't think they adjusted enough after those losses. They tried to be who they were without those two key pieces, and they just need, like I said, that psychotic level of attention to detail. I mean, Brad Holmes said that. It was the second thing he said when what he wants in an offensive coordinator is attention to detail. Every I dotted, every T crossed, all that stuff. And I know that sounds just like coach speak in a plain sentence, but I think that was one of the most notable things he said in his 40-minute press conference last week. But just wrapping up some other news and notes. The Lions also have an opening at tight ends coach. There's been no reported candidates yet. Tyler Roll is a new offensive coordinator at Iowa State. The Lions CEO, Mike Disner, he did not get the president of football position for the Falcons, but it is reported by Diana Rossini that his interview was also for the general manager role. So that's something to watch there. Kelvin Shepard did get requested by the Miami Dolphins to interview for their head coaching position. Shep obviously played in Miami. I would be shocked to see him get that job, but the fact that he's getting interviews kind of speaks to how teams around the league view him. You know, obviously he didn't finish well. The Lions would also get 2 third-round comp picks like they did with Aaron Glenn last year, thanks to the Rooney Rule if Shepard were hired as a head coach. David Shaw, the passing game coordinator, he interviewed with the Buccaneers for their offensive coordinator position. Jet Modkins interviewed with the Buccaneers for their special teams coordinator position. And that's kind of where things stand right now before we get into the mailbag. What was your reaction to Shep getting that interview as I pull our questions up?
I would say that if Shep defense finished the second half of the season the way it started the first half, it wouldn't have been a shock to me at all. But it did come off a bit surprising. I know people have their opinions on why he got that interview for reasons I'm not going to get into, but I will say that it's good for him. You know, gives him a chance to be able to get in front of these teams, get his experience up in those type of settings, and you know who knows, maybe he might say something that can that might shock everybody, and he could end up landing the Dolphins job. But I would say just given how the Lions season ended and how that defense finished, I would say that it was pretty surprising. But who knows? Maybe they're looking at the fact that hey, they had a lot of injuries to the secondary, and he adjusted the way he could. I don't know, but to not be too long winded, it still boils around being a little bit shocked.
Listen, it's a thin coaching market in terms of those young, hot, and up and coming names, and there's a lot of head coach jobs open. So it's easy to brush it off, but it's also easy to be like, if he nails that interview, we'll see. We got a couple questions about the Rooney Rule. I'm going to answer it straight from the NFL website. Last year, we were getting asked why the Lions didn't get comp picks for Ben Johnson getting hired, and I straight up just said because he's white. But here's the so I'm going to do it straight from the NFL rulebook, football operations, quote unquote. NFL teams are now required to interview at least 2 minority candidates for vacant head coach, general manager, and coordinator positions. So that affects the Lions. 1 minority candidate is required for QB coach positions, just because that's how many coaches start their head coaching careers is in the quarterback room. That's straight from the league right there. That is the Rooney Rule. We're going to get into mailbag questions to close this out here. We got one from the dude on Blue Sky. Do you think Dan underestimated the loss of his coordinators last season? It feels like this year's OC search is casting a wider net and is reflecting a more serious process. What do you think, Kory?
I don't. That's kind of hard. I don't think he
Hmm.
underestimated it. I don't think he underestimated it. I truly think that when he hired John Morton, he thought he was bringing somebody good back to the organization that knew the offense and knew what he was looking for. Um, I mean, I guess in a sense, when you talk about how many coaches they had to replace, maybe you could look at it like that. But I don't know. I don't think I got that feeling from him.
I'm going to say yes, he did underestimate the loss of his coordinators. I think they thought that if they found some like-minded guys and just plugged in guys that spoke their language, they'd be fine. And I mean, taking over play caller duties midway through the season for a first-year offensive coordinator, and then not only is that you bailing on the ship 8 games into Morton's tenure, but it's also putting more pressure on Kelvin Shepard, a first-time defensive coordinator at 37, to go I mean, Dan said he's like Shep's going to have to shoulder the load when he took over play caller duties, and I know injuries happened, safety room got decimated, but the defense fell off a cliff down the stretch. That impacts that there too. But I just think, and I'm going to say this in another answer too, but like Ben Johnson took the Chicago job January 20th. John Morton was hired 10 days later. I do think getting a head start this year adds a wider net. So I think that plays into it. I think it was always a serious process. I just think they liked John Morton because Campbell knew him. Campbell trusted him. They got the David Shaw package deal. They had some faith in that duo being able to handle the sideline to press box communication and being great voices for Goff. But I just think it was kind of the problem that people have with Brad Holmes over the last couple off seasons. It was running it back.
Okay.
It felt like it was running it back. You didn't have Ben Johnson to run it back with. So I do think there was a slight underestimation in what should still be there, a belief in Campbell's ability to fill those staffing roles with people who can handle the job. But I think the Morton experience has led to a more serious casting of the external wider net. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, when you put it like that, yeah, you're right. You're right. I just thought
I get what you were
maybe
saying.
I thought about it wrong.
No.
Yeah, I was more so like I was wondering. Yeah, I was just thinking like I thought he maybe really thought he was putting in the best coaches possible, but when you look at it from the fact that they pretty much did kind of just run it back by bringing in a familiar name, it does kind of look like okay, maybe it's just we can just plug and play and we'll be able to keep on rolling. And nah, that didn't work.
Yeah, I think there was a trust in their ability, which should still be there, but I just think it needs kind of a refreshing, maybe a new take, as we've said, a fresh voice. But yeah, what you said is fair. I just was kind of like, I think there was an overzealous confidence. Nah, we got this. 2 coordinators, however many staffing changes, we got this. I think that's why you're hearing Dan Campbell say the first thing he's doing this offseason is fully evaluating his coaching staff, who's in what role, who's doing what, who he's delegating what to. I think that is a direct response to how this season went. We got 2 from Charles Bryan. First one, we kind of already answered this, but we'll go with it because it's got a new second half. Do you know of any timeline the Lions to have for OC? I imagine that they're balancing taking the time to get the right person against having them signed by someone else. Obviously, with 40% of the league looking for an OC, that is a factor. The part that we'll tackle is, do the players or other coaches get involved in this process? Is it just Dan and Brad? Listen, it is Dan and Brad making the final decision, but this whole thing has been built on collaboration. Jared Goff will have a voice. The other coaches will have a voice. They'll have input, kind of like the Ravens owner said yesterday when asked about Lamar's process with John Harbaugh and Todd Monken and all that. Like, he has a voice. He doesn't have power. Dan and Brad have the power, but like, this is true open collaboration. They met with Sheila. They met with Rod Wood. They did all that stuff. I'm sure Chris Spielman is directly involved with the process. I'm sure Rod Wood is involved with the process. But at the end of the day, it is Dan and Brad. I mean, they are in charge. This is a 50-50 leadership. But the open doors of collaboration are what has made this thing so great over the last 5 years. And I think that will continue, including the offensive coordinator hire.
Yeah, I think that you have to have the voice of the players. You have to have the voice of a Jared Goff, of a St. Brown, of a Penei Sewell. You're pretty much your top 3 leaders on the offense. You got to be able to get their input on what they think about these guys that they're bringing in, because not necessarily saying you're gonna, you know, it's their shot, but these are guys that they're going to have to be working with every step of the way to be able to reach that goal of bringing a Super Bowl to Detroit. So you definitely want to be able to at least bring in somebody that not only that Dan and Brad mesh with, but that you know that the leaders on the offense have a respect for and are, excited or interested in working with. So I think that does matter more. I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jared Goff will be intricately involved in the process. I'm sure they'll be giving him feedback on the guys they're bringing in, the internal guys and all that, how he feels about it. I don't know the rules on getting him in the room or not or whatever, but Jared Goff is going to have a voice. Like I said, it's Dan and Brad making the decision, but they're not doing this thing without Jared Goff. They're not picking somebody Jared Goff doesn't like And if he doesn't like him at first, they're going to figure out why and go through that. But like Goff will be intricately involved. And I'm sure those other cornerstone guys you mentioned will have a voice too for at least feedback purposes. Like I said, I think the Ravens owner said it perfect yesterday. I have the power. I want their voices and input, but I have the power. I think that's kind of what we're doing here. Second question from Charles Bryan. Given the open letter to season ticket holders from Sheila Hamp, the team owner, is she going to be involved in the offensive coordinator search? Then in parentheses, he writes, as an old fan, I can't imagine William Clay Ford ever doing that. He should have frequently. My understanding on that, I think Sheila is more of a meet with Holmes and Campbell, Rod Wood, Chris Spielman, hear from them, approve, add thoughts, and just kind of be aware of the plan and what they want and what they're looking for. Like, I think she's oversight mode. I think she's meet. Here's what I expect, all that stuff. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Keep me updated. We'll continue to have meetings and stuff like that. But I think she has trusted Holmes and Campbell, and they have trusted Wood and Spielman to help them. And I think that is her main role here. But I do think she'll have feedback, updates, explanations, and feedback on those explanations for sure. But I don't think she's in there. You need to hire this guy. You need to fire this guy. You need to bring this guy in.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned the Steve Bisciotti presser from the Ravens owner because
It was entertaining. It was
yeah,
so entertaining.
it was entertaining because I'm actually going to peel something from that, kind of paraphrase something he said. It's like he doesn't want to make the decision, but he's going to give input and insight on things about candidates that maybe they could not see or pull from. And I think that's what Sheila's going to do. I think she's going to let Brad and Dan, I said Brad. I think she's going to let Brad and Dan run this process. And when they bring her these candidates, in the overview of them, she's going to, maybe give feedback on things that they're probably not considering or things that they're probably not seeing that she's able to just from an owner standpoint. So I believe that's where her process is going to be. I think that she's been hands on when needed and hands off when needed, and she really feels that she has put the right people in place to make these decisions.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do a reading. It won't be a dramatic reading, but I'll do a reading of Sheila Hamp's letter to season ticket holders. First paragraph is thanking the fans and all that, but I'll start with this one. Quote unquote. I also want to acknowledge that our results on the field this season were not what any of us envisioned, and frankly, we're not good enough. While we do not believe it is a time for drastic change, this is an opportunity for us to refocus, evolve, and move forward. I am proud of the roster we have built and the 36 wins we have accumulated over the last 3 seasons. That success doesn't happen by accident, but it also does not guarantee future success. It is incumbent upon us to continue growing toward our ultimate goal of bringing a championship to all of you in the city of Detroit. I can assure you that we are committed to looking at everything we do to ensure we are performing at the highest level. Through conversations with Rod Wood, Brad Holmes, and Dan Campbell, we are all aligned with this thinking and have already started meetings to address how we move forward. Then that's that's it right there. I think we kind of nailed her role in that situation. It's the oversight, it's the approver, it's the keep me in the loop. I trust you guys type of situation.
I think also the biggest thing out of that statement was where she was talking about the 36 wins, where it does not happen by accident, but it does not guarantee future success. I think that was the biggest line of that whole statement.
Yeah, it harkens back to Campbell's comments after the 2023 title game. This might have been our best shot, man. So, I think that awareness is important. I think speaking about that awareness and putting it out there, whether it's Brad, Dan, or Sheila, is the right method to take because people don't want to hear like, oh, we trust this process. We're just going to run it back. Like, no, this needs to get better. This needs to improve. There are tweaks needed. But let's move on. Got a couple more questions. Lions fan, bunch of numbers on Blue Skies as an offensive line question. He wants our thoughts on moving Penei Sewell to left tackle, trying Frazier at right tackle, still draft one, but could do in the second round or bring in a decent veteran. What are your thoughts on that? Kory, start us off.
I think that is actually pretty intriguing. I mean, left tackle, that's Panay's real true home. I mean, it's hard to say he's not good at either one, given what he's an all pro again for the umpteenth time. I mean, so it's hard to say that
he's still only 25.
Yeah,
man.
so it's like it's kind of hard to say like if you want to do it. Okay, I think it's not a. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think that trying Frazier out at right tackle and then selecting other tackle and then letting Panay move back to his true home. I think that is something to at least explore. But at the same time, I mean, Panay has been kind of killing it where he is right there. So it's like, hey, if it
Yeah.
ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm not opposed to trying something new just to see what Frazier does at right tackle, because if he's able to kill it at right tackle or at least be somewhat above serviceable, above average, and then you have a Panay Sewell who is still playing at an elite level back at his true home. I mean, that might bode very well for the Lions.
Yeah, I like that fans and everyone is operating with the belief that Taylor Decker is gone. You know, it really does seem like he's going to retire this offseason. Who knows? If he's back, great. If he's not, uh-oh. But my thoughts on this plan, I like Miles Frazier. I think they should continue to cross train him at guard, at tackle. I do like the thought of Panay at left tackle. You know, the whole left tackle, right tackle thing is not as it's not as meaningful as that conversation was in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. The game has evolved. The way pass rushers are used has evolved. The way offenses move around has evolved. But, like, yes, that is your bookend. That is your pass protector historically. But I don't think it's as important as it used to be. And I think sometimes we get lost in that. I think the best course is go into the offseason thinking Panay's your right tackle. I say Miles Frazier, Christian Mahogany, duke it out for left guard. Winner takes that spot. And I think you draft the best available offensive tackle in the first round of the draft. If that guy's a better left tackle, you put him at left tackle. If that guy's a better right tackle, you put him at right tackle and move Panay to the left side. And then target a center and more interior guard depth in the second, third, fourth rounds. Like, seriously, I know people want another receiver. I know people are worried about safety depth. I know people are worried about tight end depth.
Another receiver.
Oh, I didn't say receiver. I meant, what did I say? Let me hold on. I know people are clamoring for another pass rusher. I know people are worried about.
Oh, okay.
I said receiver. No, people are not clamoring for another receiver. Jeez, oh Pete's freaking Matt Millen over here. Shoot. I know people are worried about. I'm just gonna do this again. Maybe Patrick leaves the whole thing in because it's funny. I know people are worried about safety depth, pass rusher depth, tight end depth, but, like, I'm serious. I would have no problems if the Lions spent their first 3 picks on offensive linemen, first tackle, center or guard or center, however you want to do that. But, like, yeah, I think Frazier should be viewed as competition for Mahogany if you don't bring in better competition. But cross-train him. They like him. They like him at both spots. They basically said they would have taken him higher than they got him in the 5th round, and whatever that means for a team that drafted Giovanni Manu in the 4th round, I don't know, but I couldn't help myself. But yeah, it's not a terrible thought, though. You know, Panay would be a great left tackle. Anything they can do to prepare for the future is a good idea.
I do like the idea of cross training Frazier more. Just, he came in with the injury. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Now with a full off season to kind of get himself back right, cross train him, see what he does. I didn't think of the idea of having him duke it out with Christian Mahogany for that guard spot. I actually like that because, to your point you made a couple of podcasts ago, when they let Christian Mahogany pretty much take that starter role unchallenged, I think that was a mistake. So, and Dan Campbell talked about bringing in competition, and just at least for that spot right there, your competition could be right in the building. So, the idea of Mahogany and Frazier duking it out for that guard spot, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. No, I just think if Mahogany's going to be your starting left guard, make him earn it. You know,
Yeah.
when Kevin Zeitler walked in free agency, and people love to talk like the Lions never had a shot at bringing Zeitler back. I don't buy that. That's not some of the whispers I've heard. So I think Mahogany was kind of viewed as like, all right, that's the future. He was bad in pass blocking before and after the injury. They like his style. I think he's a great run blocker. I think he can grow a lot as a run blocker, but somebody's got to pass block on that interior offensive line. And I just think if he's your guy, he's got to earn that job. I mean, 100% he's got to earn that job. Tate is safe. Sewell is safe. Center's up in the air. Left tackle is Deckers if he comes back, but that's a big if right now. So, whew, I just the most shocking thing to come out of this season, even more so than missing the playoffs, is just the offensive line makeover that's going to be needed this offseason. It
Yeah,
is
that's crazy.
it happened so fast. I mean, that just goes to show you how fast life moves in the NFL, how important guys like Frank Ragnow are to an operation, because this was still an offensive line with a solid amount of talent, and it vastly underperformed, slipped, led to the team losing its identity, was the key factor in, like, off the top of my head, like 5 of those 8 losses. So that's like the most shocking thing to me is like not a second offensive coordinator search, not missing the playoffs, not going 9-8 is like, holy crap. This offensive line went from this team's strongest pillar to its prickliest thorn, like overnight. Overnight.
I don't think the casual fan understood just how important that offensive line was to making this offense run because, you know, yeah, specifically Frank Ragnow. Sorry for guys in the background. If you hear a little kid, that's the little one.
Oh, it's light. It's all right.
Yeah, man.
Ambient.
When you look at what Ben Johnson did the moment he got to Chicago, what did he do? He worked on acquiring talent for that offensive line because in order to run for you, any quarterback needs a good offensive line. But in order to run the offense the way that Ben wanted to, he knew he was going to need some dogs in the trenches. That's exactly what he did on day one when he got there, when he had the chance. And now you see why they're in the playoffs and they're going to the divisional round. They have some little bit of lady luck on their side, but up front in the trenches, Caleb Williams went from being the most sacked quarterback in the NFL to, I mean, last I checked, he was sacked under 30 times this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah. And Goff took a career high 38 sacks.
Yeah, so I mean, they got to go ahead and improve that. The and it's just again, like you said, it's just so shocking. Frank Ragnow goes, and then out with Frank Ragnow, you lose Kevin Zeitler, and then now you're talking about potentially losing Taylor Decker. So the makeover that has to happen so quickly is just it's wild. And
Yeah,
but
it
I
is.
will say this: they finished 9-8. I think if they just had a little bit more talent, we're not making this. We're not on this podcast right now.
No, we're coming home from a yeah.
We're actually probably in Allen Park right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's weird to think about that it's January 14th and we're doing our second off-season podcast.
Yeah.
Next question came from Baseball Casual. Can't do it on the podcast. That is, I tried to do a little legwork on this. It wasn't easy as I thought in the prep time. Give me a minute, Baseball Casual. I will report back maybe on the next pod, or maybe I'll just blue sky you. We're going to get out of here with one more question. It's from the God King of Mars. Actually, we got two more questions. We're going to start with this one from Brian Brook in Pittsburgh. Jake Bates is one of my wife and my favorite players. He's such a humble guy. Seems to have that clutch gene. I understand he's an exclusive rights free agent as the conclusion of the season. Is it given that the Lions will offer him a 1-year minimum deal, or might it be longer? How would you characterize his performance this year? Bates obviously had a more down year this year, but like there's still the most belief in him being the kicker of the present and the future. And honestly, I would expect the Lions to use those exclusive rights that minimizes his salary cap, the cap hit, all that stuff. It gives you time to work out a longer deal, which I do think will happen. Like I fully believe 99.9 repeated percent that Jake Bates is the kicker of the present and the long-term future. He's more than a long leg. Obviously, he was a little inconsistent this year, had trouble with low kicks, but like he does have that clutch gene. He is humble. He is a great fit for that locker room, and I just think there's a lot of trust in him continuing to grow, continuing to cement his role, continuing to become a better all around kicker.
Yeah, unless they're talking about drafting a kicker in the late rounds, which would kind of shock me this year. This time going around, I see them working out something with Jake Bates long term. I mean, his first year here, it was to me above average, and this year a little bit of a down year, but still made some necessary kicks, clutch kicks as we're talking about, and I just think he's just a good fit with this team. So I would be shocked if they went in a different direction with another kicker. I mean, again, if you're bringing in somebody during the seventh round, it would shock me. But okay, I mean, maybe you guys see something in him that you know maybe you guys see something in the guy, but that I just kind of tongue tied here because I'm like I just never thought we would talk about Jake Bates being gone or or
He ain't going nowhere.
yeah, he ain't going nowhere. So yeah, it's kind of it's like he's here.
I don't think they'll bring in any competition for him either. Like, I really think he's like that locked in. I don't think like he didn't have competition last year. I don't think he'll have competition again this year. He did miss 7 kicks this year. He only missed 3 last year. Upped his long to 59. Was money on extra points. Only missed 2 of those. Had a couple overall kicks blocked, and I think he really settled in with the new kickoff rules as their place kicker too. I just I just think he's got a lot more room to grow. He's 26 years old. He's the kicker of the present and the future. I don't even think there'll be competition for him, like I said.
Nah,
One more I'll knock out from Finley Miller. I'm curious to know what you guys think about Rocky Ya-Sin's performance. Will Lions keep him around as a starter? Will be relegated to a corner of the depth chart? I ranked Rocky Ya-Sin as my number 3 pending unrestricted free agent for the Lions this year. Only Muhammad and Anzalone were above him in my rankings. I think Ya-Sin is not your starter, but I think with the injury concerns with Rakestraw, with Arnold coming back from 2 shoulder surgeries and multiple injuries this year, and DJ Reed's hamstring and his play not being good down the stretch, cornerback depth is important. Rock Ya-Sin looked like a great CB2 at times. And when Robertson hurt his hand down the stretch, it was Rock Ya-Sin on the outside, Robertson back in the nickel role. I think Ya-Sin should be back. I think they liked him. I think they want him back. I think that is your first outside cornerback off the bench.
see here, I want to say this. I put Rock Ya-Sin number 2, given the fact that I think that Al-Quadin Muhammad and Alex Anzalone are not coming back.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
fair.
my that's my caveat. I put him number 2 is because when he stepped in, all he did was make plays, and he was more than serviceable at the role. And I think that in the spot that they're in right now, well, like you said, with we don't know what's going to happen with Rakestraw, and the secondary position is a little bit beat up. I think that he's just a quality, savvy veteran to have in the locker room. And it feels like he really meshes with everybody well in there as also. So I think that's something important too. So I have him as number 2
Yeah,
for me
I love it.
is
He's yeah,
as importance. And again, that's only because I believe that Al Quadin and Alex are just gone.
yeah. I El Quadin's going to get an offer that's too hard to refuse from someone, and I'm curious to see what happens to Anzalone just because their defense is better with him on it and they're much worse without him on it. And you don't really need to create another need at linebacker. So we'll see there. They didn't want to pay the bill in August. I'm curious what they want to do this time around, what type of commitment he's looking for. I mean, Alex in August said he wanted to finish his career with the Lions, I asked him on locker room cleanout day if he still feels the same. He said, yeah, hell yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But here's my thought on Ya-Sin and why we're both so high on him. I think if you bring Ya-Sin back, that's your top outside corner off the bench. If you bring Amik Robertson back, that's your primary nickel back. And if you bring Ya-Sin back, I know the Lions made Rakestraw an outside corner as primary focus before he got hurt this past offseason. Rakestraw needs to be your nickel back in waiting. Whether he's the guy going into training camp, whether he's competing with someone, whether it's Robertson and Rakestraw, Rakestraw's better on the inside for this defense. I think that's the better long-term future there. I think Ya-Sin, outside corner, number whatever off the bench would be a great get. We'll see there because I think Robertson could be back, and I think Ya-Sin could be back too. And if those two come back, I want to see Rakestraw working in the slot just because Robertson struggled this year, but they know him, they like him, they know he can do multiple roles. I think he's much better suited as an inside guy, but I also think Rakestraw's future is on the inside. But you can't count on Ennis Rakestraw is the main point of this. And I think re-signing Ya-Sin and Robertson would kind of be a nice way to approach the secondary. I know that's running it back, but you gotta bank on those young guys having a role eventually. They took Rakestraw in the second round for a reason. So we'll see what happens there. Just they're strapped elsewhere, man. They got so many needs. It's going to be interesting to watch. Final question, because we somehow went this long today. This is the one I teased a couple minutes ago. The God King of Mars. On a previous podcast, you guys have said extending Gibbs is a no-brainer. Isn't the move with running backs to have them play out the fifth-year option and then franchise tag them, maybe even twice? When speed running backs lose a step to age or injury, the production falls off a cliff fast. As such, avoid long-term commitment for as long as possible. So Gibbs is 23 years old. I think he's firmly in the bucket of sign right now in a Penei Sewell style deal. Exercise the fifth-year option, tack the extension on top of that. Dude has scored a touchdown in 31 games through his first 3 seasons. That ties Randy Moss and Barry Sanders for a record. He's been an absolute stud. He's a game breaker. He's one of those guys. When you're talking about guys who have the potential to be the best at their position in the league, you keep them. You keep them. And I just think the fact that he's 23 years old and the Lions have done a really great job managing. I know he's got a lot of touches, a lot of usage, but they have done a pretty solid job managing his usage. But if Monty's gone, we'll have to see how he handles even more. But I would do a deal this offseason, exercise his fifth-year option, tack the extension on top of that. I would do that without blinking.
Jamir Gibbs is easily, I would say he's probably the second, or take your pick, because golf is number one, but he's easily the second or third most important person on the offense. I mean, there's no disrespect to it. I mean, we can flip flop whether you want to say whether it's a St. Brown or Panay for that third, whatever. But Gibbs is such a Swiss Army knife in the run game and in the pass game, where he is a guy that you need to lock up whenever you get a chance to do it. He makes this offense flow in so many different ways, because when he gets out in space, he's probably one of the most scariest players in the NFL. And I just think that just don't play around with it. Just go ahead and lock him up, do what you said with the contract, and then just get this thing done and not even really think twice about it. Because again, he's only 23 years old. Now, if he were somewhere around like 28, 29, and you're starting to see the decline, okay, sure. So, okay, I get you. But I mean, he's only getting better. And this is a quote unquote down year for him. So I just no. I think you figure out a way to go ahead and get this thing done now before it becomes more expensive later on down the line, trying to kick the bucket on it. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. Get Gibbs deal done first.
And maybe my opinion is swayed because I just played Rich Silva of the Detroit News and Madden the other night, and he set an NFL record for most rushing yards in a game on 15 carries with Jamir Gibbs. But on a more, it was disgusting. On a more serious note, Over the Cap projects Gibbs' fifth-year option at $14.153 million. I would do that in a heartbeat. And honestly, man, Saquon Barkley is the only running back making north of $20 million per season. If you exercise that fifth-year option, and if you want to tack on a 3 for $65 million deal to lock him up for the next 4 seasons, I would do that in a heartbeat. Like, you don't want that running back money, which it's going to get higher and higher. You saw that happen with Sewell and Wirfs. You saw that happen with St. Brown and some of the receivers in his class, because there's also a guy that's extension eligible, and it's Bijan Robinson. And you don't want to compete with what that deal is going to be. There's even A-Chain from that same class. He's not going to be in that ballpark, but like, he's going to get a decent deal too. So you don't want to do that extension after Bijan Robinson gets his. I'll just leave it like that.
Jamir Gibbs had a down year this season. He still rushed for 1,223 yards and 13 touchdowns.
Yeah. Exactly. And I kind of like the franchise tag more as an option for Branch or Laporta coming after this season, guys that you need more medical information on. You don't know how Laporta's back is going to hold up. You don't know how Branch or when he's going to be back from his Achilles injury. So I think if we're talking about franchise tags, what the Lions have not used in my entire 7+ seasons on the beat now, I think Branch and Laporta are franchise tag guys. Not this season, because they still have a year left on the rookie deals, but after this season, just to kind of get more information, spread those extensions out. I know franchise tags can get pricey, but when we're talking safeties or tight end, they get a little lower. But We'll see. That was a nice little mailbag hybrid offensive coordinator podcast as Kory struggles through the finish line. Oh, my goodness. The offensive coordinator search will continue on. I am taking a couple of days off starting tomorrow until next Monday, this upcoming Monday. But hang with MLive.com/Lions, and we'll see what's going on. We're going to kind of play the first couple of weeks of the offseason by ear when it comes to the podcast. We'll probably work in a break here next week or the next week, and then we'll definitely do one Super Bowl week and whenever the offensive coordinator stuff gets hired. But hang with us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're still kind of hanging. This felt like a good weekend to get away with you and Jacob around, but that's all we got for you. Please. We're not going to do like fully committed mailbag podcast, but I'm going to continue probably on Blue Sky because that's been the best response outside of the Dungeon of Doom at MLive.com/email. But we'll take questions, we'll tackle topics, and as the draft gets closer, we got to start digging into that sooner than later, man.
Yeah. I am really curious to see when this coordinator hire is going to come. It's right now we're recording. It's January 14th. I don't think this is something that gets long and drawn out. I think this thing is going to come by sometime next week.
Yeah. You could talk me into end of the month or in the next week. I think there's still another week to this search, just as more guys become available and stuff like that. But I do think we're closer to a hire than not. So next week I could see that. But all right, guys, that's all we got for you. We are MLive's Dungeon of Doom podcast, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
See you later.